Hi, Hugh.
Hi, Greg. How you doing?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Can't
You've been
complain.
making some really good videos that are full of truth. I noticed you put one up about Ed Asner and my buddy Oscar Tyler Moore and DB Cooper the other day. You made one mistake in it. We need to correct it. So that's why I asked you to make this video. So let's correct it now. Can you play that video?
I've got it primed and ready.
Go ahead and play it. Good seeing you.
Actor Ed Asner, who you probably didn't know was of Ukrainian descent. That would be important in this video because here he is on the Mary Tyler Moore show. He brought in a bunch of other Ukrainians with him or associated with him, and the Ukrainians have a lot to do with Hollywood. But let's connect all this to Hugh. Here's Ed Asner here in the back. You know of Mr. Ed, the talking horse. No coincidence. Came out about the same time. They're referring to Ed Asner. Okay. He comes and runs Hollywood. But Mr. Ed came from Francis the Talking Mule. The idea for Mr. Ed came from a previous show, Francis the Talking Mule. Now, Francis the Talking Mule was originally adapted from a novel by David Stern. Do you know any Sterns in the media right now? Well, here's the show, Francis the Talking Mule, back in the black and white days. Now, if you ever wanted to see a connection between Hollywood and the Federal Reserve banks and who's really running both, look no further than right here. Stern was the director of the Federal Reserve Bank in Philadelphia.
That was real interesting.
Yeah.
Seeing as my family members are on all the American money, and Stern helped steal my name way back 20 years before 9/11. That was an interesting thing you found there. Gone. That's not the mistake, but that was too interesting not to point out.
To see which families run Hollywood and also run your banking system, here's all the proof you'll ever need right here. Oh, and Howard Stern is also of the same family origin. Isn't it interesting that Howard Stern introduced the world to Huey Lewis and the news? Do you really think that's a coincidence? Hugh's first job as a newspaper boy for the Detroit News. The Detroit News stole the words that he invented, bottom line, and put this on the cover of their newspapers. Huey Lewis and the news took their name directly from this association. The big newspaper can do it, why can't they? And also, here you got Stern, who also was a newspaper publisher. The Huey Lewis was not even his real name. It's just all a fraud. Now, Ed Asner was a Ukrainian, and the Ukraine is in the center right now of a big U.S. scandal where U.S. lawmakers' families are funneling foreign aid at U.S. taxpayers' expense into their own pockets, graft and payola.
And we explained that, Hugh, on that video that we made, the Greatest Con on Earth Part 3. So if anybody knows what we're talking about there.
Yeah, that's correct. And all of that is because of Fagan in New York telling all the new immigrants that Thomas Jefferson's family are communists.
You'll notice that actress Natalie Wood is also of Ukrainian descent. Now, isn't it interesting that she was murdered by the Wagner family, thrown off of a boat, probably rejected some advance, and they murdered her for it? That'd be my guess. Here's Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley was the Wagner family. We discussed in the last few videos that 10 years to the day after Elvis Presley died, remember Elvis Presley died on a toilet, supposedly. Hugh Squires was chained to a toilet as a 4-year-old.
Stop it right there, Greg.
Stayed after.
Okay.
It's real important to note that, Wagner is the grandfather in Elvis's life. And I worked for Wagner building Jeep Wagners in Detroit. And one of the biggest banks in the country, he tried to poison me, Charles Caldwell, at Wagner's. And that Caldwell banker, he was dead within a week after attempting to murder me. And then Mick Jagger's family sent me a Christmas card after the murder. And that occurred back in around 1990. And the man's name was Charles Caldwell, and he worked for Wagner. And I left that job. I wasn't there when Mr. Caldwell died, but that's a really big link back to Stern and the corporations across the country stealing my trademark Bottom Line, which was a federal publishing license and in every country on earth at the same time.
Yeah,
so,
Stern was a banker, and in Caldwell, there's the big Caldwell banks too, I believe.
Right, Caldwell banks, yeah. And Jagger runs Caldwell real estate in this country. And people don't know things like that. I grew up right in the middle of all these murders as they stole my business and publishing license and tax license and murdered people all around me. You know, I have a murder in my life every day of the week. Currently, I have that coronavirus marking me in the news. Go ahead, go on. None of those are mistakes. I'm just pointing out a little bit more than what you put in the original video.
Very interesting.
Elvis, to this very day, after Elvis Presley dies, Hugh is poisoned and his plane goes down on Interstate 94, just outside of the Wayne National Airport in Detroit. Elvis Presley is the Wagner family. It's also no coincidence that the Roden family massacre near the uranium enrichment facility in Piketon, Ohio, was blamed on the Wagner family, as Trump-supporting Ukrainian mafia murdered the Roden family to get Ohio Governor John Kasich out of the presidential race in 2016, which he did about a week after this murder of 8 members of the Roden family. Ukraine, by the way, is where uranium is enriched for the former USSR. Wagner mother appears in court for pre-trial hearing in Roden family massacre. Well, how about Sylvester Stallone? You thought he was Italian, right? Yeah, I did too. Ukrainian Jewish descent. Interesting, isn't it? Now, we mentioned that Mary Tyler Moore was with Ed Asner at the beginning of the article. Moore is in Hugh's family cemetery. Now, this one, most of them they have a picture, but this one didn't have a picture. But it is right there in the website that chronicles his family cemetery. So there really are Moores in his family cemetery. And the Moore family is the Kennedy family. Don't believe me? Ted Kennedy. His real name is Edward Moore Kennedy. Oh, Mr. Ed. Oh, Ed Asner. Moore, huh? Mary Tyler Moore. We'll go back to the beginning. Ed Asner, Mary Tyler Moore.
There's those famous pictures of Putin on a horse. Remember the famous pictures before the last presidential election of Putin without a shirt on top of a horse?
Oh, right. That is an interesting connection.
Putin knows your history better than you do.
Interesting. I didn't put that together.
And everything you said there is the truth. The Moore family and the Hill family, that's my family. Smith family. Go on.
Now, Hugh's friend growing up was Oscar Tyler Moore. Isn't it interesting that Mary Tyler Moore never received an Oscar? However, she was posthumously honored by the Oscars. This was done because Oscar Tyler Moore died in a car wreck when Hugh was 17 years old, approximately.
Stop there. Okay, that's where you made the error. Oscar didn't die in a car wreck when I was 17. I and Oscar went to school with the real D.B. Cooper. Dan Cooper died in a car wreck when I was 17 at my school in Warren, Warren, Michigan. He hit a telephone pole and died instantly in his car. He was drag racing another guy. And that's the real D.B. Cooper. And the FBI used his name for the hijacker, as I and Oscar and D.B. Cooper went to school together. We grew up together. And then it's interesting that Oscar Mayer was a doctor in Michigan that attempted to murder me. And he wasn't my doctor. And then you got the song, Oh, I Wish I Were, an Oscar Mayer Wiener, as I and Oscar, through parties and my newly formed band, we would play at the parties at Oscar's house, where the police SWAT teamed Oscar and stuck shotguns down his little sister's throats when they were 4 and 5 years old. And I'm serious, shotguns down little girls' throats. And they did that because I was holding the police off at my house with a Mauser, and it was the same Mauser that killed the Kennedy family, John F. Kennedy. And the police never SWAT teamed me, and I was 1 block away from Oscar. And the reason they didn't SWAT team me is I was holding the gun that murdered Kennedy, and they didn't want it in a court record. And I didn't kill Kennedy. Nobody in my house did, but we ended up with the gun that did kill Kennedy. The police, to save face in 2 counties, Macomb and Oakland County, who had my house surrounded for 2 weeks, while I sat at the front door of my house at 17 with a shotgun, holding them off, and a Mauser, holding them off. They never SWAT teamed me. I held off 3 police departments for 2 weeks, and while I was doing that, to save face in the newspapers, they SWAT teamed Oscar's house, and Oscar wasn't doing anything wrong. He and I went to school together, and D.B. Cooper, the real one, had just died.
Right.
And this was several years before the FBI used our friend's name as a hijacker who probably never existed. To this day, they call him D.B. Cooper. That was never his real name. That was a name given to him by the FBI for the newspaper. Just like Ted Bundy never existed, that's another name that was given to a serial killer. And both of those names given to serial killers relate to my life in big ways. That's how they hid the Kennedy murders from the nation. They hid the truth of the Kennedy murders from the nation by hiding me with fake names and marking me in all media without ever saying I exist. Right. Go ahead. Oscar Tyler Moore died of cancer 2 months ago.
Right.
And his wife, he found his wife in a dumpster at Graceland on the same day my wife was dismembered and her throat was slit, Halloween Day 2011. Oscar lived at Graceland in Memphis, and I lived on the east side of Tennessee near Virginia in Mossheim area. My wife was murdered in Johnson City, Tennessee with her attorney as he went to file murder charges. Oscar's wife was found in a dumpster dead, and I'm sorry, not his wife, his girlfriend. He wasn't married yet. And like I say, Oscar, he died 2 months ago of throat cancer. And anybody can look at the police records in Tennessee and see I'm not making up a story. I've lived this. This isn't, I don't think these things happened. I lived them, and I still have an open murder case on my own wife in Johnson City, Tennessee. So go ahead from there, Greg, with your video. That's a really great video, other than it was D.B. Cooper who died in a car wreck, not my friend Oscar Tyler Moore.
Right. Yeah, and that's an important distinction because, I mean, it leads into all these other things that you just said. So, yeah, he definitely had to have been alive, for his girlfriend to have been killed on the same day as your wife, and for the name D.B. Cooper to have been used for that possibly fictitious other D.B. Cooper that supposedly jumped out of the airplane. Absolutely an amazing story. Okay, I'll keep going.
Now, combine the fact that she was not honored by the Oscars until after she died, though she probably deserved one, and the fact that Oscar Tyler Moore died in a car wreck and see that Oscar Mayer Wiener built a wiener-shaped car. Now, Hugh was also used as a sex slave by the recording industry and people like Daryl Hall, who would stand in a circle around him as he was used by the families of governors and famous musicians. Do you remember the Oscar Mayer song, I wish I was an Oscar Mayer Wiener, then everyone would be in love with me? This song is no coincidence. Hugh Squire really is marked in all media, as it was planned by governors and the electors that put them there. It's the same pedo-gay political alliance that murdered JFK, Jimmy Hoffa, and countless young children, including Hugh's twin brother. And this is why the young Saoirse Kennedy Hill was murdered and then buried at St. Francis. Hugh's middle name is Francis. Go back to the beginning of the article, Francis, the talking mule. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.
Yeah, it's interesting to note the guy that was the friend to Francis the Talking Mule also taught me electronics when I was a kid. And he was also, his family were an Olympic gold medal winner back around the time I was born. All of these things are real history that the government's hiding from the American public because they don't want you to know the real truth of who murdered the Kennedy family, because those people have been running your country all these years, and the Federal Reserve. So your video,
the Federal Reserve.
Your video is completely accurate other than Oscar Tyler. He died of throat cancer about 2 months ago after finding his girlfriend dead in a dumpster. At the same time, my wife was dismembered and murdered on Halloween Day 2011 on the opposite side of Tennessee. And none of that is coincidence. That's a country, a worldwide mafia that stole my trademark, bottom line. And it's still being used all over the world with my birth name in every country on earth. Thank you for your videos. And I appreciate you researching me, Greg. You have more truth than anybody on earth. And all media is hiding my existence.
It's an unbelievable undertaking.
Yeah, I know, Greg.
I
know.
Really.
You're doing a very good job. I hope that you can write books and tell my truth.
I really hope that people really take this information as seriously as it's.
If they don't, it's their loss, Greg. If people don't believe what you're saying, you know yourself, I show you a document and document everything I say. And I have letters from every senator in the country. You know I'm not lying to you. You're a very good writer, and you're a very smart, educated man. Thank you for your videos. Thank you for attempting, to say some truth to your American neighbors. I really appreciate it. I like the Joker movie. Isn't it amazing what they stole from me all the way back in 1970?
Yeah, that Joker movie and that song, "Send in the Clowns," really had quite a history to it, didn't it?
Yeah, you missed the fact that they murdered Kiki Nelson, I think, in that video. Ricky Nelson's cousin. She and I were going to be married. She was chained to a tree, dismembered, raped, and then murdered near Christmas Day many years ago. All of my fiancés and wives have been murdered by the government to hide my truth of the Kennedy family. I am a Kennedy. I grew up with the Bouvier family, and Moore and Hill are my family members. And I'm even related to Schwarzenegger in various ways. He married a Kennedy. And I'm related to Jackson on your 20. I grew up with the Lincoln family because my great-grandmother was with Lincoln in Ford Theater as he was murdered by the actor Booth. History's replaying itself in my lifetime. Now you have the actors in Hollywood killing the Kennedys and hiding me, as my family ran Henry Ford's mansion. Ford Theater, Henry Ford, Kennedy, Ford, actors. It's replaying itself, Greg. And they do this every, 75 or 100 years. They murder your president or attempt to. And it's all about money and controlling the Federal Reserve. in destroying the founders of the country. My family wrote your Constitution. They authored it.
Right.
Thanks for your videos. You have a good day.
All right.